Chapter 10. The storm that had trapped Victoria and James in the abandoned amusement park had passed, but the tension it created lingered like an unwelcome guest. James had spent his entire nights replaying those moments in the maintenance room, the closeness, the unexpected kiss, the vulnerability he'd glimpsed in Victoria's usually impenetrable armor, and her swift retreat back to coldness the moment they were free. James set Victoria's morning coffee on her desk precisely at 7:15 a.m., the way she liked it, black, with exactly half a teaspoon of sugar stirred exactly 14 times, not 13, not 15, heated to precisely 165 degrees. Today marked the second consecutive day she'd arrived before him, despite his deliberate effort to be early. The circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't gone home at all. "The Henderson account files?" Victoria asked without looking up, her voice clipped and professional. No good morning, no acknowledgement of his punctuality with the coffee, and certainly no mention of the amusement park. "The audio files are already uploaded to the shared drive, and printed copies are in the blue folder." James replied, maintaining the careful neutrality he'd perfected as her executive assistant. "The quarterly projections?" "Updated with the latest figures. The revised analysis is on page 4. "And the Matthews presentation?" "Scheduled for 2 p.m., conference room A is booked, and I've sent reminder emails to all attendees." Victoria finally looked up, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. If anything, she seemed more severe than before the theme park incident. Her makeup was flawless, her suit impeccably pressed, her posture rigid. It was as if she were overcorrecting, building her walls twice as high to compensate for the moment of impulse. "The presentation deck needs to be completely redone," she announced, sliding her tablet across the desk to him. "The color scheme doesn't match our updated brand guidelines, the font is 2 points too small on slides 7 through 15, and the graphics look like they were created by a first-year design student with a hangover." James felt his jaw tighten. He'd spent hours on that deck, following the exact specifications she'd provided. "I followed the template from the marketing department, the one you approved last month." "Well, it's not good enough now," Victoria snapped. "We need to stand out. This is bland, mediocre. Is that what you strive for, James? Mediocrity?" And there it was. James fought to control his frustration. This was Victoria's way of reestablishing dominance, of proving to herself and to him that nothing had changed, that the vulnerability she'd shown in that maintenance room had been an aberration, a momentary lapse in judgment brought on by unusual circumstances. "I'll revise it immediately," James said, keeping his voice level despite the heat rising in his chest. "And the wing contract needs to be reviewed by end of day. Also, cancel my lunch. I don't have time." She waved him away dismissively, already returning her attention to her computer screen. James retreated to his desk, the day stretching before him like an obstacle course designed explicitly for his failure. He pulled up the presentation and stared at it, the color scheme swimming before his eyes. Every fiber of his being knew there was nothing wrong with this deck. This was Victoria's way of making him pay for seeing her human side. By noon, James had reworked the entire presentation, choosing a slightly more vibrant color palette and increasing the font size by exactly 2 points. His stomach growled, reminding him that he'd skipped breakfast in his rush to arrive early. Not that it had mattered. As he was emailing the revised deck to Victoria, Chad Winters strolled past his desk, pausing to lean against the edge with a sympathetic smile. "Rough morning?" Chad asked, his perfectly tailored suit somehow remaining unwrinkled despite his casual pose. James shrugged noncommittally. Office politics demanded discretion, and Chad, for all his friendly overtures,
was still Victoria's competitor in the company hierarchy. She's been on the warpath since yesterday. Word is she had a coincidental meet with Elena Vasquez. Let's say her mood turned for the worst. Not that it excuses treating people like disposable resources. I wouldn't know about her personal matters, James lied. Smoothly, though he felt a jolt of surprise. Elena Vasquez, formerly Victoria's closest friend and confidant, an heiress to Meridian Technologies, Sharp Innovation's most aggressive competitor. The two women had had a falling out so dramatic it had become company legend, though the details remained murky. All anyone knew was that Elena suddenly hated Victoria. Chad's eyebrow rose slightly. Right. Well, my offer still stands. My managing director is transferring to our London office next month. The position would be yours if you wanted it. Fewer hours, better pay, and I promise not to make you redo presentations that are already perfect. The temptation flashed through James like lightning. Quick, bright, and dangerously illuminating. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine a world where his boss didn't swing between Arctic coldness and explosive criticism, where his talents were appreciated rather than taken for granted. I'll keep that in mind, James replied neutrally. Do that, Chad said with a knowing smile, before continuing down the hallway. James's phone buzzed with an email notification. Victoria had sent back the presentation with a one-line response. Still not right. Fix it. No specifics, no guidance. Just another impossible standard to meet through trial and error. The afternoon unspooled in a series of increasingly unreasonable demands. By the time 6 p.m. arrived, James had revised the presentation 4 times. Each version met with the same cryptic dissatisfaction. He'd also reviewed the Wang contract, rescheduled 3 meetings to accommodate Victoria's suddenly packed schedule, and fielded calls from clients who sensed her distraction and sought reassurance. Most of the office had emptied when Victoria emerged from her office, her bag slung over her shoulder. She paused at James's desk, where he was still working on the 5th iteration of the presentation. I need you to come in early tomorrow. The board wants updated projections for the Sullivan account. Something inside James snapped. Not loudly, not violently, but decisively, like a rubber band stretched past its capacity. No, he said quietly. Victoria blinked as if she couldn't process the single syllable. Excuse me? I said no. James's voice remained calm, though his pulse thundered in his ears. I've been here since 7 this morning. I've revised this presentation 4 times without any specific feedback on what needs changing. I've handled the Wayne contract, placated the Matthews team when you canceled the presentation without explanation, and managed your schedule while you've been... He hesitated, then said it anyway. While you've been punishing me. She expected anger, expected to be fired on the spot. Instead, Victoria's face went carefully blank. A stillness settled over her features that was somehow more unsettling than rage.
My office, she said after a long moment, turning on her heel without waiting for a response. James followed her, closing the door behind him. Victoria moved to the window, her back to him as she gazed out at the city lights beginning to sparkle in the dusk. I thought we agreed not to bring that up, she said finally, her voice so quiet he had to strain to hear it. James remained silent, sensing she hadn't finished. For once, I wanted to rebel. Victoria turned to face him, her expression unreadable. I was drunk on the success of the closed deal, yes. I wanted a different space, far from all these... She gestured around her office, the realm where she reigned supreme and in control. And yes, she continued, I was mortified that you saw me like that.
Being carefree doesn't inspire confidence in leadership. Being human doesn't make you a weak leader, James countered. It makes you relatable. Victoria's laugh was sharp and humorless. Is that what they teach in management courses now? Because my experience suggests otherwise. Show weakness, and the vultures start circling. She paced to her desk, straightening a pen that was already perfectly aligned. I saw Chad talking to you today. Let me guess. He offered you a position again. James hesitated, then nodded. Of course he did. Victoria's smile was tight. He's been trying to undermine me for months. Taking my assistant would be quite the coup. I didn't accept. Yet? Victoria's gaze was piercing. But you will if I continue to be, what was your phrase, even more demanding and unreasonable than usual? The directness of the question caught James off guard. He considered deflecting, but decided honesty was the only path forward from this impasse. I already said I don't want to leave, he said carefully. I believe in the work we do here. I respect your vision and your drive. But yes, if this is what working with you is going to be like going forward, I'll have to consider other options. Victoria sat down in her chair, suddenly looking exhausted. The perfect posture, the immaculate appearance, it all seemed like an elaborate costume designed to conceal the very human exhaustion underneath. I'm not good at this, she admitted after a long silence. At what? At balancing, at being both a leader and whatever I was at that park. She gestured vaguely. That person who behaves wild. You don't have to be one or the other, James said. Most people contain multitudes. A ghost of a smile crossed Victoria's face. Quoting Whitman to your boss. Bold move. I'm apparently feeling bold today. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, exactly, but it held less tension than before. Victoria drummed her fingers on her desk, appearing to consider something carefully. I need an executive assistant I can trust, she said finally. Someone who can anticipate my needs, maintain discretion, and execute tasks flawlessly. I do all of those things, James pointed out. Yes, you do. Victoria's admission seemed to cost her something. But I also need someone who will tell me when I'm being unreasonable. Someone who won't let me sabotage myself or this company because she hesitated, because of reckless impulse. The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and unexpected. I can do that too, James said quietly. But not if you shut me out or punish me for seeing the parts of yourself you're trying to hide. Victoria nodded slowly, a decision crystallizing in her expression. She proposed an agreement, she said, her business tone returning, though less severely than before. You continue to perform at the exceptional level I've come to expect. You maintain absolute discretion about anything personal you might observe or learn, and in return, she paused, visibly struggling with the next part. In return, I will attempt to provide clearer feedback. I will try not to overcompensate when I feel exposed, and I will listen if you tell me I'm being unreasonable, though I reserve the right to disagree. It wasn't a perfect solution. It wasn't even particularly warm, but from Victoria Sharp, this constituted a seismic shift. Do we have a deal? She asked, extending her hand across the desk. James considered the offered hand, the tentative olive branch it represented. This was Victoria attempting compromise in the only way she knew how, through formal agreements and professional boundaries. It wasn't friendship. It certainly wasn't the acknowledgement of the more complicated feelings he caught himself harboring for her. But it was something, a recognition of his value, a small step towards a more honest working relationship. He took her hand, noting the firm and softness of her grip. "We have a deal." Victoria nodded once, then released his hand. "Good. Now, about that presentation." "The blue in the original deck was better," James interjected, testing the boundaries of their new agreement immediately. It aligned with the subtler brand messaging we've been developing for the Matthews account. The brighter colors you've been pushing for would work for a younger client, but Matthews appreciates understated elegance. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, and James wondered if he'd overplayed his hand. Then, remarkably, she sighed. "You may have a point. The font changes should stay, but we can revert to the original color palette." The concession, small as it was, felt monumental. James nodded, resisting the urge to look too satisfied. "I'll make those adjustments and have the final version to you by morning," he said, moving toward the door. "James," Victoria called after him. He turned back to find her watching him with an unreadable expression. "Thank you for being with me that day. For..." She gestured vaguely, clearly uncomfortable with explicit gratitude. "Just thank you." "You're welcome," he replied simply, understanding that in Victoria's world, those two words had cost her more than most people's lengthy apologies. As he closed her office door behind him, James felt the weight of the day settling into his shoulders. Their agreement was fragile at best, a tentative truce that either of them could break at any moment. Victoria Sharp was still Victoria Sharp, demanding, exacting, and emotionally guarded. But as he gathered his things to leave, he caught himself smiling slightly. For the first time since he'd started working for her, they'd had an honest conversation. Victoria had acknowledged his value beyond his ability to anticipate her needs. It wasn't exactly warmth, but it was recognition. And for now, that was enough. Or at least that's what he told himself as he stepped into the elevator, determinedly ignoring the part of himself that had noticed the vulnerability in her eyes when she'd banked him, the part that had wanted to comfort rather than negotiate, the part that was caring for Victoria Sharp far beyond the bounds of professional propriety. Some agreements, after all, were never spoken aloud.
Thanks for listening. To continue the story, tap the thumbnail on your screen. And if you're enjoying this romance, give it a like and subscribe to Spoken Romance Library audiobooks.